Nah, bruh, it's a legend. It's all according to the code. Them Illuminati on my mind, body, and my soul. That's why they snatching bodies, everybody in a Holly Grove. Deception is a hobby, switching roles with the auto clone. We call that an auto hoax.
Man, what you trying to prove? Don't you know we've been around the globe and been to the moon?
Get it, that's an auto hoax.
You tripping, times two. What about the shootings that they always cover on the news?
Real, that's an auto
They
hoax.
don't move, we will make the way. Let it spray, right reality like an AKA. Let them know we don't play. They live like life's a party, but it's really like a breakaway. Meditate, focus your attention on your better days. You know what I'm talking about. Don't let these slimy narcissists, antichrist out there turn your eye. Freedom of speech is actuality. That's why the truth must spread by word of mouth, word of mouth. It's all according to the code. Damn Illuminati with my mind, body, and my soul. That's why they snatching bodies, everybody in a Holly Grove. Deception is a hobby, switching roles with the auto clone. Let me turn on my auto hoax. Not even a proven fact. The floor curves into a spinning ball, and you can test for that.
Globe is an auto hoax.
Man, you must be trolling me. Scientific theories aren't what they are shown to be.
Yup, that's an auto hoax.
So what you're saying is you don't accept the claim that's missing proof, then you label it.
Exactly, it's an auto hoax.
Wow, sports is scripted by the number code. What do I really don't? Let me turn on my auto hoax. Squad.
All right, we are live 6/27, 2024, Infinite Plane Society Evening Deprogram. That was Auto Hoax by DJ Ready Rel. And we also have Solemite Fly, and that track can be heard at infiniteplaneradio.net on the 24/7 stream, where I'm trying to put more music and archives up there. We'll give people time to show up. A number of you may have been watching the debate. Somebody forgot to charge CGI Joe Biden's batteries. Not a lot of action there. But the most interesting thing that happened today has nothing to do with politics. I'm not interested in the puppet show anyway. But this is huge. This is a major development here. We have this story that just came out. Russian satellite breaks up in space. Forces ISS astronauts to shelter. A defunct Russian satellite is broken up into more than 100 pieces of debris in orbit, forcing astronauts on the International Space Station to take shelter for about an hour, adding to the mass of space junk already in orbit. So we get this storyline here. An old Russian satellite breaks apart, forcing the astronauts to duck for cover. Now, where have we heard this before? And this is why this is incredible and highly significant. Francis Ford Coppola's Megapolis, quote, "The script always had an element of an aging Soviet satellite falling out of orbit, falling to Earth. On Megapolis, General Zod throws Soviet satellites." On Megapolis, I see. Now the story here, again, Francis Ford Coppola doesn't begin here, but it actually goes back. So let's start with this. There is a story about how he wrote this script for Megapolis, which I haven't seen it yet. But he made this script before 9/11. And one of the reasons why it wasn't produced is it had some kind of scenes in here that had to be stripped out of it because it was so reminiscent of what happened on 9/11. You know, predictive programming, in other words. It says here, instead of being stuck with this Megapolis project, which after the events of September 11th, I didn't know how to continue with it. Asked if 9/11 was what stopped him from working on Megapolis, he said, "It made it really tough. A movie about the aspiration of utopia with New York as a main character, and all of a sudden you couldn't write about New York without dealing with the implications of what happened. The world was attacked. I didn't know what to do with that, but I tried." So my point of it is this. He has this script pre-9/11. He had to stop it because of 9/11. And we have been saying that the next 9/11 is going to be a space 9/11. And all indications, judging by the metascript, point to Russia being a major culprit. So here we have a story about a Russian satellite breaking up in space, forcing the ISS astronauts to go into shelters. They had to duck and cover for space junk. And his movie Megaopolis actually has in it one of the main themes, old Russian satellites breaking apart. So you can see here, this is an example of what I would call a metascriptor. Again, quote, the script has an element of an aging Soviet satellite falling out of orbit, falling to space. So I suggest here that this is foreshadowing for the next 9/11, which will be a space 9/11. All right, let's see who's joined us in chat here. Copaesthetic, Elephant Tusks, JT, Ready or Not, Roxy W, Jennifer Reeves, Ears Up, JT, oh yeah, NA Literalist says, millions of super smart people believe in it. Yeah, exactly. Cope says, homeless tweaker shelter in space. Yeah, the ISS is a reality TV show, a 25-year blooper reel. But people do believe in it, and the point of it is this. It's part of a broader narrative. It's like a monument. These are all part of the bigger story. The Twin Towers were a big part of it, and they were replaced by the One World Tower, which opened on 11/3, and has copious significance and symbolism built into it. Something was just pointed out today, in fact, by Synchromorpheus, and this is something I didn't know, but there are so many things about these monuments that are worth talking about. But look at this here. When the lighting is just right, the view from inside the 9/11 Empty Sky Memorial forms a visual corona around the One World Trade Tower, which looks like a big syringe. And it was functionally a pipe. Like it was actually working like a big flute, like a pipe, as they were building it. Which is significant because the word syringe comes from syrinx, which is Pan's pipe. Pandemic. These are related concepts. We're talking about the god of the wilderness, this deity that evoked, panic, and panicdemic is clearly implied here. But this is just another example of the symbolism intrinsic within this thing. And my contention here is that it represents the Tower of Babel. And we have been witnessing the sinking of the West, the fall of the West, as described here metaphorically as the Tower of Babel. And I believe it really begins the story here with the Titanic. The sinking of the Titanic is a huge part of this narrative. And it connects to the sinking of the Twin Towers, which have been, of course, replaced by the One World Tower. But that I think that this is a contiguous narrative structure, and it goes from the bottom of the ocean, in the abyss where the Titanic is, to the surface level, to outer space. And to me, this is the complete Tower of Babel, which is being pulled. They're WTC-7ing the Tower of Babel. And the final piece of it is when the space station falls. The tower represents unity, worldwide, one language, from Earth to the heavens. We've achieved that with the internet, the unity, the monolithic mind control. And this is what is intended to fall. And that's what Leave the World Behind is ultimately about. When the whole thing that connects us all, the collectively agreed upon mass delusion, crumbles. Now, the next thing, of course, is a space 9/11, and they can't have it unless we're ready to accept the existence of space junk. And now it's real. There's a family in Florida suing NASA over space junk that hit their house. Significantly, this piece of space junk can be traced to 3/11/2021, the anniversary of the pandemic. I noted this is the largest piece of space junk ever dropped. They dropped it. We haven't heard about it for a little while. I figured it just quietly, killed some whales out in the Pacific, but no. It broke apart and a piece of it hit somebody's house. But that's from 3/11. And I had suggested that these are clues, that the next agenda is going to be a, quote, pandemic of space junk. It's going to be space junk Armageddon. It's going to be space wars where China is shooting down the 42,000 CubeSats, and this just becomes a regular facet of existence. And if you're not wearing a helmet, you don't believe the science. You're not trusting the science, and the helmet Karens are going to glower at you at the grocery. And space helmets, or rather space junk helmets, aren't a new thing. There were space junk helmets back when Skylab fell. And on this is all just reoccurring. Everything is so recycled here. Okay, let's continue. Oh, great news, by the way. with regard to the little story we've been having this back and forth, and the whole narrative I put out there was that Witsit Gets It would never admit to believing in chemtrails because he would have to employ several logical fallacies, and that he's too well versed in these to use them. That it would necessitate he would have to use them pretty much knowingly. It would necessitate dishonesty. He would have to be dishonest about it. That was my contention. I didn't think he would respond. So what I tried to do today, and what I succeeded in, is I thought, well, he's not going to respond to me because I'm an internet nobody. But if I can tag some people that he will respond to, maybe he will. So I dragged Fight the Flat Earth into it, and we managed to get a response out of him. So here is what we got into, basically, and I was pretty much right about it. He said, this is Witsit, he said, "You people are such weirdos. I have no idea who you are, nor any idea what you're talking about." He's referencing me. He said, "Chemicals are sprayed in the sky by planes according to government documents." So there he goes. He asserts that chemicals are being sprayed in the air, and this is according to government documents. Of course, I guess we believe in government documents now. So appeal to government documents fallacy, right there. My whole point was, you cannot make an honest claim about, quote, chemtrails. You can't. It necessitates the use of logical fallacies, of mixing, conflating definitions, moving goalposts, mixing up geoengineering with HARP, and it's just a word salad of conspiracy buzzwords. That's all it is. And he goes on to say, for example, weather manipulation was done in the 50s and 60s, chemical warfare tests, implementation, solar geoengineering, sulfur particles in the sky. So he lists all these things, and then he goes on to say, the conflation with the historical precedent of chemicals being sprayed and later admitted with the assumption of white streaks in the sky being chemtrails is a tactic used to muddy the waters. What does that mean? What he is suggesting here is that there's already all kinds of stuff going on, and the lines in the sky are just muddying the waters. So what he did without doing it is he denied believing in chemtrails because they don't exist. And instead of saying they don't exist, he points to solar geoengineering, blocking the sun, sulfur in the sky, Bill Gates is going to kill us all type stuff. But he couldn't answer the question, no, there's no chemtrails. The word is trails. We're not talking about stratospheric aerosol injections, and none of you who believe in that stuff can tell me what the injector looks like. Like, what does the nozzle look like? Is it dangling from a drone, a balloon? Like, I don't understand this concept. It's never been explained. But my point here is that he is claiming, without saying it bluntly, that chemtrails is there to muddy the waters. And the reason he doesn't want to just say it bluntly like me is he doesn't want his 15,000 followers to attack him for not believing in chemtrails. So he believes it without, he's equivocating. But let's go on. He says, the truth is, nobody knows the extent of chemicals being sprayed in the sky. Nobody knows. So this is an appeal, rather this is an argument from ignorance, and his implication is that it's not known. What he should say is, I don't know. But just because you don't know doesn't mean it's not known. But he's using this statement as a way of asserting it as a fact, but he supplies no facts. Nobody knows what kind of chemicals are spraying in the sky. Like, that's absurd. Nobody knows what the cumulative effect of unicorns marking their territory in the stratosphere is going to have on the environment. Nobody knows. It doesn't make it real. But this is, again, what you would expect. This is sophistry. This is sophistry. This is not even pseudoscience. This is word games, word magic, to get people to buy into some truth or orthodoxy. He goes on to say, however, there objectively exists government and military programs in which chemicals are sprayed in the sky, including weather manipulation and covert warfare. Again, assertions with no facts. He says, I provide dozens of declassified government documents including from the Air Force. Again, his whole argument comes down to appeal to the government docs. Appeal to government documents. My point on it, I guess, my final statement here is that Witzig gets it, demonstrated exactly what I said he would. He would have to violate his own adherence to truth and rational argumentation in order to maintain a belief. And he knows it. He knows he's wrong about this. But he's got the documents, yep. Oswaldo says he lied. I think he does know who you are. I'm just an internet weirdo. I'm a nobody. But since Fight the Flat Earth is a somebody, I dragged him into it. But the whole point of it is this. This is essentially right-wing climate change. And I don't want to give it any more time as far as phone calls. I get these people who call in and they're just scared. They'll talk for hours about how they're scared of what's coming out of airplanes. It's like, I'm sorry that you're afraid. I'm sorry that you're scared and that you live in fear. I'm sorry you're a skyphobe. I'm sorry that you're paralyzed and you're uncertain about what's going to happen to the world. It's a real sad state for you to be in, little truther. But, it's just paranoia. And at this point, it's like, well, maybe you need to talk to somebody about it. Because it's a delusion at this point. It is a delusion. It's a delusion if your argument is based on appeals to ignorance and a deliberate attempt to obfuscate facts, which is what they do. But anyway, I'm just pointing out that this isn't like a phobia hotline. Like, oh, I'm afraid of 5G towers. Let me call Infinite Plane Radio and explain why I'm afraid of this current thing. No, I'm afraid of cirrus clouds. I'm afraid of fill in the blank. Like, no, this isn't a place for that. If you're afraid, you need to talk to somebody about it. You really do, because we're not for paranoid conspiracy theorists. We are for, if anything, jaded media critics. But for the most part, we're engaged in media deconstruction. And we're doing so with full knowledge of what the media does, which is it promulgates narratives. Many of them are designed to frighten people into submission, to cow people to the power of the state, the authority of this monolithic mind control apparatus. And the lefties worship Gaia out of fear because they don't want Gaia to destroy them. This makes them easy to control because Gaia is just a mask of government. Gaia doesn't exist. Similarly, the chemtrail side of it, the right side, they would be fearless. They wouldn't fear the skies. They would be happier than the other side. But they have to also be cowed. They have to be scared of government. And who does the right-wing chemtrail believers blame for the manipulation of the environment? Government. They don't say, oh, these darn truckers with their carbon footprints. No, they say it's a secret government project. So they need your fear. And if you fear government, which you do, if you believe you're being sprayed like a cockroach, you are in fear of the one who's spraying you. And you're so scared that you're not going to go call the cops on them. You're not going to sue them. You're so scared. You're cowed. And you're just as cowed as the climate people. And I'm just saying, it's okay to be scared, but I'm not really like a therapist, and I can't cure it. What I will say is that the fear is baseless, and it's not harmless. You have psychosomatic, you have nocebo effects, placebo effects, mind over matter. There's all kinds of ways you can screw with yourself by plugging into their fear. It's addictive, I'm sure. But anyway, let's move on. Salty Siren says his first issue is claiming chemicals are bad. That blows their whole argument, as well as environmental virtue signals. Well, look, chemicals are bad. A lot of the people who say this stuff don't really know what that word means, or they misuse it. It's monosyllabic, it's scary. But I really have to question the integrity of someone who is claiming to be afraid of a cloud 25,000 feet above their head because it might have some jet fuel exhaust in it. Yet on the ground, they're happy with cocaine and whiskey and cigarettes and secondhand smoke and vaping and sedentary lifestyles, video games, trashy entertainment, junk food. Like, I'm pretty sure that's worse than what might be in that cloud above your head, 24,000 feet above you. It's about priorities. But if they could take your bandwidth, because that's all you have. We're all just receiving information And our sentience, our consciousness, our center of self, our ego, is a filter that gives us a coherent picture. But our bandwidth is limited. We can only pay attention to so much. We can only give so many Fs. And if you're like, well, I'm going to give an F about what might be in those clouds. I'm going to give an F about what might be in that 5G tower. I'm going to give an F about open borders, FEMA camps, FEMA coffins, World War III and nukes. Then what's left? It's very draining. And I'm just saying that it's a waste. And here we, at the off-world stage, here in our ivory tower at the raft, we have nothing but cognitive surplus. We have, like, our bandwidth isn't even being fully tapped into yet. Like, we are really just surfing atop the sea of irrelevance, the sea of mis, dis, and malinformation, fearlessly. Like, I'm not scared and I'm not confused. And if you are, you're programmed. Buzzing Fret says, any confirmed cases of chemtrail lung? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. You'd think there'd be a class action lawsuit, all the truthers. Elephant Dust says, same chemtrail time, same chemtrail channel. Look, you may not like this issue, Elephant Tusks. Are you a believer? Before I explain why we're doing this, are you a believer, yes or no? Here's the reason why. We need litmus tests to get rid of believers. We do not want believers in quarantine. Believers and followers are not seekers and knowers. There's a philosophical difference as far as it's an epistemological difference. We have pulled our heads out of the box, and your head is in the box, and you're snorting chopped up red pills for whatever high it gives you. But the point of it is that it's needless agitation. It's literally propaganda. So what I'm saying here is that we need to find all of the major, I would say, orthodoxies, the things that make up Trutherville. Like, what makes Trutherville Trutherville? Well, these are a set of beliefs that create an exact parallel, an exact mirror to what the woke believe, but just from the opposite side. Like you got critical race theory in Woketown, you got critical Jew theory in Trutherville. These are mirrors. And I'm just saying you have to step outside of the programming from the perspective of, you don't just join the anti because the mainstream is pro. You have to be anti-anti. And I'm trying to get all the anti-antis on the same sheet. And we are, in fact, fomenting a culture of disbelief, of non-belief. Because we recognize that there are three groups of people in the world: the programmed, the programmers, and the deprogrammed. And deprogramming requires an act of individual volition. It doesn't happen by osmosis. You don't catch it. Nobody can wake you up. They can only pull you deeper in. They can pile on all kinds of additional beliefs to warp your worldview and turn it into a nightmare. But no, they cannot pull you out of this. So we're not interested in saving people. We want them to identify themselves as denizens of Trutherville. Like, look, I'm going to be sitting here beneath my angry chemtrails, yelling at the sky, and you guys go out there and relax. It's like, yeah, exactly. You don't have the moral high ground just because you're agitated and ready to go to war or run for cover, run for the hills. If you're reaching for your ammo and not your popcorn, then they control your mind. But anyway, let's move on. Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is a clown. I'm sorry, he's a clown. He's a parody. He's not an authority on anything. He doesn't believe what he says. He says he has no problem with Laura Loomer, who is a Zionist. And he says he's cool with her because he says that she believes in America first. This is such a hypocritical organization, this America first thing. Anyway, he's a clown. This is a joke. He believes in grooming. He's like planning on marrying a 16-year-old because he believes that women should be pregnant and barefoot and illiterate and in the kitchens, and they should be incubators for the state. He believes that there shouldn't be any non-whites in government. I mean, there's a laundry list of garbage this guy promotes. But he's a total Poe. He's a total parody. I don't believe he believes any of it because of his association with Ollie Alexander. And Ollie Alexander is also associated with InfoWars. Scammy Davis Jr., you may remember him. A total creep. I don't want to get into America First and what those guys were about. But listen to this. Just another person parroting the same meme. This meme has been forced into our collective psyche for what? For our entire lives, really. It's built into the Trump character, but they've really ramped it up. Listen to this.
You have to realize they have thrown everything short of assassination at him. That's one way to look at it. If there's kind of an escalating menu of options that they could do to prevent an individual man from taking power, prevent this campaign that he's been on, they've done everything short of that. Impeachment, lawfare, they've gone after his family, they've lied about him in the press.
They played every card. But
it says, the new Civil War movie is eerily right about how the country could split apart. And I want to point out that the movie is really not a movie. There's no plot. It's some reporters covering the war. So the movie gives the impression that journalists are on the front lines seeing the atrocities so we don't have to, and so we can choose to turn it off. We can turn off our TVs. It turns the media into martyrs and into self-sacrificing, I would say, almost like heroic, self-sacrificing martyrs for truth, and the rest of the country doesn't care. It was meant to garner sympathy for the media, and then it made everyone in America look like racist rednecks who want to lynch people. The movie's garbage, but the plot of it is, let's go kill Donald Trump, and the president's obviously Trump, and they made it a point that the person who kills him be a black female. Why is that? Because this is propaganda. And this is some kind of revenge drama. Nothing new. They've been killing Trump since 2016 and even before that. But 2016, they killed him in Central Park as Julius Caesar. But here we are looking at Nick Fuentes talking to Alex Jones about how they're going to...
assassination.
Everything up to that. And if you think that that's something that isn't on the table, it's, as you said, JFK, his brother RFK, his son. There's a whole host of them. MLK, Malcolm X, you name it. This is something that the intelligence agencies specialize in. And when you get these major false flags and when you get these major wars, you also get the assassinations too. And so I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, as you say. I think it's probably far more likely than most people think.
So here they are just conjecturing about the JFKification of Donald Trump. All right, let's continue. Simple question says, Bill Hicks born to Alex Jones 4,440 days. Alex Jones is 20 years, 2 weeks, 2 years old when Hicks died. Do these relationships mean anything? I'm really starting to question the methodology when it comes to calendar dates and gematria calculators. All right, we're joined by RJ Adaptivia. Thrustazar says, AJ was purposed to replace Bill Cooper. Yeah, Bill Cooper was spot on with NASA, and I think that was a problem. He was probably an insider, DMLA, probably part of the PSYOP entertainment complex. He said there'd be a lot of shootings, and he wasn't an auto hoaxer. And you can say, well, they didn't know. They were operating with limited information, and that's the best information they could have arrived at. And let's give them that. Let's give them that. But we can also say the same for synchromystics. So the people who believe in false flag shootings and the people who believe in synchromysticism kind of overlap. These two things exist in the same fictional universe. But if you take out false flag theory and replace it with hoaxes, then synchromysticism makes zero sense. You wouldn't have eerie coincidences from the universe predicting fake events and PR stunts. That doesn't make a lick of sense. The only way it made any sense is that they were forecasting, that predictive programming was forecasting real big tragedies. And it's just like, wow, that's profound. But no, it's not profound, which may be disappointing to some, but it's not profound. It's like the Mandela effect. Once you get to the bottom of it, you realize, oh, it's a scam. Synchromysticism, false flag theory are both false. And these are both explanations that, again, didn't have the benefit of the full spectrum of information you would need to understand what these things are. So false flag theory implies people are being killed, that events are happening. It doesn't take note of the fact that the media isn't reporting the news, but is in fact producing it. That they aren't informing us about the world, but they are conforming us to a worldview. That scripting, pre-scripting of news is the standard operating procedure. And this can be demonstrated in many different ways. So we have, in the last 6 months, really honed in on this. We moved past false flag theory a long time ago. We had to fight off a number of death clingers, corpse clutchers, refusing to let it go. But no, there's no false flags. And synchromystics is, again, it's a nice explanation, but it assumes a lot, and it comes from a incomplete understanding of how media operates and the true role of predictive programming. So when I see these, it's 56 days and 2 months and 55 weeks and 36 days before this event, and therefore, I'm like, well, you got to take these numbers and explain to me how they mean anything. What makes 333 significant? What makes 33 weeks and 3 days significant? What that does is it uses the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, where you can generate a lot of answers and then choose the ones that are right. And it makes it look like there's some order in the chaos, but there's not. The Texas sharpshooter fallacy is based on the idea of a guy shooting a barn. He shoots up a barn, the whole wall of it. Then he finds out where there's a group of holes close together, and he draws a target. And then he shows you the target, but you don't see the misses. And what they do is they say, this is so complex, man could not have done this. Therefore, synchromysticism. Therefore, God. Therefore, this is biblical. No, you're obfuscating it. It doesn't work. You can't use it in a predictive way. You can make these connections, but that's not the same thing as saying these connections are intrinsically meaningful. Elephant Tusk says, I would like a clear definition of synchromysticism. Okay, synchromysticism says this. We'll go with an example of concurrent programming. Like right now, we'll go with Waco. Trump kicks off his campaign in Waco right after Netflix releases Waco American Apocalypse. Waco American Apocalypse has to do with the beginning, the genesis of the white nationalist movement. In Waco, the gun grab narrative, and it involves characters like McVeigh, like Alex Jones, and the symbolism, the 1.6 million rounds, January 6th. These things are all connected. And Trump says that this is the final battle. So you have Apocalypse, Final Battle, Trump, Dave Koresh, who was Jesus and said this was Armageddon. So the synchromystic will say, wow, there's no way man could have planned to have released a Netflix show alongside the campaign kicking off there. Therefore, God did it. Therefore, we're in a simulation. Therefore, a higher power is at work. So they're attributing divinity, like, yeah, media is divinely inspired. Netflix is inspired by a divine entity. That's synchromysticism. And synchromysticism always rejects the idea that man is the cause of all these coincidences. Another one, James Cameron, Titanic, 1997, splits in two, one half sinks than the other, very 9/11-y, it's got jumpers. On 9/11, he's at the location. He's at the actual Titanic when the Titanic sinks, and he's filming ghosts in the abyss. So the connection here is his movie contains predictive programming for 9/11. He's at the Titanic wreckage, which is what the movie was about, and it connected the Titanic to the Twin Towers. And on the day the Twin Towers sank, he was down there. Now that, to me, is easy to explain. We're looking at a bigger story, a bigger narrative, and James Cameron is a part of the direction of how they merge psychological operations with reality. And they've merged fiction and reality seamlessly. People are not able to tell the difference between real and fake unless they're told. But the synchromystics will say, that was all coincidence. James Cameron was there and James Cameron only created that scene because he was divinely inspired. And that's why he predicted 9/11. So, in other words, they're constantly talking about higher power, which is it's the divine fallacy, God of the gaps. It's lazy, and you have no evidence for it. But we have evidence for pre-planning, scripted news, a news-bent reality. And I liken it to this. If you're going to say that supercomputers, demiurges, and gods are responsible for coincidences in the media, for example, I mean, this is getting so insane that people still can stand up and proclaim this. We have so many examples of how, no, this is obviously the work of man. But my point of it is this. If you're going to say that it's a higher power, then you're missing two things. You're missing the culprits, so you're letting the reality hackers get away with it. It's like, oh, we don't believe in computer hackers. That's too complicated. Gremlins do all the hackings. If you said that, if we all believed that, computer hackers would get away with it. Right now, the reality hackers, the newsbenders, get away with it because the conspiracy theorists don't believe they exist. They say, no, it's the supercomputer higher power. Anyway, I'm done with this conversation. I'm just saying, we already debunked it. We debunked synchro mysticism. And you cannot point to one example of predictive programming that must have been put there by a higher power. Whereas, and then that's where synchro mysticism is at. They're at, oh, we don't believe it could be scripted. Oh, really? But you believe in psyops. You know psyops exist. Every psychological operation, every PR stunt is a pre-scripted bit, a pre-scripted scene to be inserted into the historic narrative. All right, let's continue. Thrustazar says, allegedly tomorrow, Friday, 628 LAPD emergency drill, active shooting. There might be a psy opportunity in LA. Elephant Tusk says, is it not possible for a higher power to move people around like pawns in a chessboard? I guess this depends on your will, on your view of free will. See, this is the thing. I think that mystics, if you're going to promote something like this, you're going to say, well, I don't know if people have free will. Well, you know you do. And so are you suggesting others don't have agency? And then the other side of it is the simulation people say that this isn't real. Nothing's real. And to me, that's gaslighting. If you tell me I'm not real, I'm saying that you're pretty much gaslighting me. Reality exists whether you like it or not. The fact that we have a fictional universe superimposed over our worldview doesn't detract from objective reality. The auto-hoaxers are the only true skeptics in the world here. Because no one else is operating outside the framework of media. We're also the only objectivists. And one final point on this about higher powers, prove it, would be my point. Because if you're going to, again, a lot of people have leaned on this for years. Oh, a higher power is responsible for predictive programming and God's writing the Simpsons scripts. Like, no, if you're doing this, you're missing how media operates. The news bending of reality. How does it work? Well, you take any major psychological event that's planned in advance, you implement it like it's a reality TV show. Only it's treated as real, and it's put into the historic record. The big events are the ones that all the minor events bounce off of. So you don't have to script everything. That's a ridiculous straw man caricature of what we're saying. I'm not saying every little detail is scripted. I'm saying they paint the zeitgeist, they write the history in broad strokes, they have the major scripts, big narratives, major psychological operations, and everything else bounces off these and is allowed so long as it doesn't contradict the assumed reality of the events. And I believe that there are efforts to get ideas out there among the intelligentsia, among the thinkers, to discredit them or to lead them astray. If I was running the Matrix, if I was a programmer, and I'm in charge of billions of minds, I'm going to realize that, you know what, a certain segment of them are going to figure this out. So let's throw in mysticism. Let's throw a curveball at them. Before they figure out that there's objective reality and there's a worldview which is a false model, we will convince them that the model is reality and reality is false. We will gaslight them into ceasing to be objective witnesses to their own brainwashing and conditioning and programming. And that's what they've done. That's why I'm anti Mandela effect. It's not an authentic spiritual revelation. It's a misunderstanding of memory. It's false memory production. They literally are creating false memories. But the point of it is, it destroys objective reality. And what they did with the advent of the atom bomb is they destroyed objective reality. When you're drawn into a cult, whether it's a traditional religious cult or the mainstream media cult, you've been put into a subjective reality. You're now in a world where nukes exist, where aliens might exist, where space junk is real. I'm not in that world. I'm not in there. Now, you're in a world that believes in space junk. You're in a fundamentally different place than someone like me, because there are a whole list of things that go along with space junk. And my point of it is, I have taken the stance of the conscientious objector from the Psy-War. None of these threats exist for me. But my point here is that synchromysticism and false flag theory, these are all placed there to prevent you from arriving at the level of awareness the programmers have. They don't want you to deprogram. And that's what we offer here. Mind war inoculation, deprogramming. Elephant Tusk says Art Bell was controlled op. You know, a lot of people say a lot of stuff about Art Bell, and I find it interesting. But I'm going to withhold what I know, what I learned working for Dark Matter, until I have my insider in circulation. I see a lot of hero worship, kind of like people are caught up in a version of things that may not be real, but you know, it depends on how you look at it. You know, he did produce the first climate fiction book. It was like called The Coming Superstorm. Paranormal. Okay, so here's another thing. Paranormal. Paranormal includes, you know, ghosts, Bigfoot, and UFOs. Well, we know UFO mythology was invented by aliens, abductions, by the Air Force. The Air Force special, they had these special agents who infiltrated the lives of conspiracy theorists and gave them UFO mythology. So we know this to be true. So I'm saying, why would anybody believe in it? And then you have shows like Coast to Coast Paranormal, where it's fringe, but it's acceptable fringe. It doesn't challenge the dominant paradigm. It assumes all of the parameters of the MSM world. At best, it's MSM plus. And they're too cowardly to touch, quote, conspiracy theory. They never even go that far. But I'm not holding it against them. It's just entertainment. But it's not the same as what we're after. Like, I'm not here for believers or paranormal fetishists, Bigfoot stalkers, whatever. That's all fine. But to me, it's really about maintaining a purity of perception with regard to recognizing what the screen is and what agendas are behind all of its narratives. And the paranormal area all reinforces the dominant paradigm. So does Mandela effect. You can't separate the Mandela effect from CERN. You can't separate it from our modern scientism paradigm whatsoever. I would say Mandela effect is not compatible with the stationary plane. Okay, let's continue. Elephant Tusk says they destroyed Coast to Coast after Bell left. See, I never really listened to it. I always felt like paranormal was lightweight. It never went far enough. And I never found the stories of aliens to be that compelling. The whole field is obviously contaminated with bad argumentation. And what I find ironic, though, is you got UFO debunkers. You know, I called out Witsit Gets It because there's no way he can believe in chemtrails without using logical fallacies and sophistry, which he's usually against, but he's not against it here. Similarly, Mick West from Metabunk is a big-time UFO debunker. He debunks UFOs all day long. He doesn't trust anything just because it's video when it's a UFO. And yet, he believes in outer space and space stations, and he's fooled. He's tricked. Yes, Metabunk's Mick West is literally tricked by all of NASA's garbage special effects. It fools him. And I'm like, wait, how do you see through this bad UFO stuff. You just see through it. You're critical. You're just taking it apart. You're vivisecting all this UFOology. And yet, you look at NASA stuff and you're like, looks real to me. That's mind control. That's frame of reference as a way of boxing people into compartments where they can't even bring their critical thinking to this other container, this other box. It's remarkable to watch. It's brainwashing. I want to point out too, Coast to Coast is responsible for chemtrail belief. If you didn't know, that's what popularized it. And you still get a lot of these liars who say, oh, you don't know because you're not old enough, but when I was a kid, we had blue skies, and now our skies are yellow and white and chemicals. And they only started this in the 90s. No, they didn't. No, these were well documented. 40s, 50s, the Air Force documented them extensively because they wanted to best understand how to prevent creating contrails with their military aircraft for obvious reasons. You don't want to give away your position. So they studied them extensively. And the thing that causes them, the common denominator, the common factors here, it's not what's in the plane, what they're spraying. Are they spraying on, off on the switch? No, it's not even under the control of the pilot. Rather, it's about the environment. It's about the altitude, about the pressure, about the fact that it's very, very cold, very, very high. Okay, let's continue here, going through your comments. Let's see here. Coast to Coast was intertwined with X-Files, Portal had said. Oh yes, that's what I was bringing up. Coast to Coast is responsible for the chemtrail conspiracy theory. And nobody's died of chemtrail lung since the 90s. But anyway, this is a topic that I'm going to kill. Like, it's going to die. There will be no chemtrail believers by the time we're done. And you might think that's far-fetched or that's too ambitious. It's like, no, truth is the truth. Facts don't care about your feelings. You're entitled to your own opinions, your own phobias, your own irrational fears, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And one of my points here is, and it's not just this issue, there are a number of truth or orthodoxies that we're deconstructing. False flag theory, synchromysticism, Mandela effects, chemtrails, and more. And what we're doing with these is we're going to be pointing out the fact that there are certain people who are in positions of influence, and they are going to be put in the position of choosing. Are they going to choose to go with truth, or are they going to gatekeep something because of popular opinion? But it's very important that we separate these issues. We make a distinct effort to destroy each one and to hold influencers accountable. If you have 50,000 followers and you're going to be spreading fear porn, if you're going to be spreading propaganda, if you're going to be a propaganda mule, you should own it. You should just come right out and say it. And then you should have to answer for it. Like, so for example, Witsit Gets It says, yeah, I believe in chemtrails because of military documents, but they're not chemtrails. They're stratospheric aerosol injections and chemicals sprayed in the sky. So he gives us this word salad, 8 paragraphs long on Twitter. Yeah, he pays Elon Musk so he can post long tweets. So he posts his long tweet and gives this non-answer. But I could follow it up if I were debating him, and I would say, if you literally believe that you're being sprayed like a cockroach from secret government drones, why aren't you wearing a mask? Why aren't you masking your family? Why aren't you wearing PPE? Are you not really afraid? And that doesn't make sense, because everybody's afraid of chemicals being sprayed in their face by secret government drones that are designed to kill you and kill Gaia. Everybody's afraid, right? I mean, isn't that scary? And so it doesn't make sense for someone to promote a fear but not act scared. Ollie Goering says, I hate the term influencers. The term influencer, I believe, came out in time for the advent of the mind virus. They want to demonize influencers, influenza, mind flu. Do you recall the Economist cover from Solstice 2017? Said, The new shape of Chinese sharp power. China's sharp power. Now, look, let's just decode this. Let's decode this Economist cover. That looks like a COVID ball, but this is from 2017. Only it's red on China, nowhere else. So this is like ground zero, Wuhan, fish market, bowl of bat soup. It hasn't spread around yet, but you can imagine that if this whole thing were red, it would look just like a COVID ball. It says sharp power, the new shape of Chinese influence. New shape. Oh, novel shape. Like as in novel flu. Chinese influence, Chinese influenza. The novel Chinese influenza. And beneath it, a big COVID ball. This is predictive programming. But the influence, influenza, influencers, mind virus, mind flu, yeah, that's all part of it. They're applying the lexicon of epidemiology to words so they can get people to agree that we need to quarantine minds, that we need to lock down the internet. Roxy says Art Bell did a pitiful debate regarding flat earth. All he did or was instructed to do was name, call, and berate, showing his ignorance. He seemed to expose his stupidity. Yeah, look, I'm not one to spread rumors, and I'm not going to make claims that I'm not prepared to back up right now. But I have a folder on Art Bell, behind the scenes, controversy, what happened before supposedly his house was shot up, before he supposedly suicided on Friday the 13th. I mean, I'm not even convinced that he died when they claim. But I think that he ducked out right on time to avoid something that would have been a disaster. But nobody wants to talk about it. And anytime I bring it up, I'm surrounded by people like, I love Art Bell, I have these great memories, and they start talking about it, and it's like, okay, I'm not gonna engage in iconoclasm tonight. I'm just gonna let you engage in your nostalgia or whatever, but I don't know. We'll see. Okay, I have some comments on a video I posted. I did post a video on YouTube, which I think I called the video. Let me see if I find it here. I'll put a link in the description. Oh yeah, Witsit Gets It Chemtrail Truther. And yes, he is a chemtrail truther. But Booster Bear says, you're a pretty good troll, Tim, employing Fight the Flat Earth. Yes, I would not have been able to get Witsit's attention if I didn't invoke or call up Fight the Flat Earth, who's a nasty troll. User FH9 says, toxicology profile for JP5, Jet A fuels produced by the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry, Department of Health, Human Services. So this guy here is saying that airplanes are toxic, but he's not wearing a mask. Moody Bug says, referring to me, I love the way he tries to look all edumacated on the subject where he's misguided. I agree with everything else he says, but chemtrails, this is again regarding that video, the contrails do not linger and spread. They turn the blue sky gray. So I'm wrong because the blue skies have turned gray. Let's Go says media fundamentalism is the worst kind of mind virus. Yeah, it's a religion. Me and My Drone says he's had 10 years of chemtrail indoctrination and another that won't prove his claim. They think your job is to debunk them when they haven't proven their claim. Yeah, okay, that's a great point. Witsit Gets It and others who believe in chemtrails, they think we have to debunk their claim. They're like, well, I don't know what it is. You tell me. It's like, wait, just because you don't know doesn't mean it's not known. And if you haven't tested it, if you haven't consulted the available evidence, then you're arguing from ignorance. It's an ignorant argument, and I would be embarrassed to be a chemtrail pusher in 2024. It's embarrassing. I don't know. I'm confused. Maybe somebody else knows, but it's not known. No, you're misrepresenting it to make it seem like it's a mystery. And I want to point out that I'm the least confused person that I know. I'm not confused. I might be agnostic about some things where we reach a limit of information and where it's not enough for me to make an affirmative statement, but I am far from confused. You're not confusing. I'm not confused when I look at airplanes. But in order to be a chemtrail truther, you have to admit to being confused. Oh, I am baffled by that. My mind is blown. What is that? But I know it's bad. But again, you don't have to debunk what hasn't been bunked. Like I don't have to debunk Mandela effects. I'm doing them a huge favor. I don't have to. They haven't bunked it. You can't prove it exists. I don't have to do Hitchens' razor. Christopher Hitchens' razor. And Christopher Hitchens was not an atheist. He bought into the God construct of scientism. The entire modern paradigm is built around a God construct and appeals to maybe not God by name, but God by proxy. But he had this epistemological heuristic, his razor, which was that which is asserted without evidence could be dismissed without evidence. I don't have to debunk your silly claim. You have to prove it first. Burden of proof's not mine. And that's another typical thing. Chemtrail truthers will shift the burden of proof. They'll tell you, oh, do your own research. No, you've been at this for 15 years. You ought to be a doctor in chemtrails. There's no excuse for you to be walking around acting like you're confused and baffled. Okay, continuing. The Black Hand Side says, are you okay? Have you heard about the wildfires in New Mexico? Yeah, they happen every solstice. Every solstice. Before I started paying attention to the fake news and the scripted nature of it all, I was noticing a lot of patterns with regard to fires and the solstice. And it occurred to me that we're probably looking at pagan rituals in plain sight. Beltane fires and everything, disguised as something else. Side topic. Although I would maintain that witches and warlocks and druids do in fact run this world. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Alright, I think we've covered quite a lot. I barely scratched the surface with the notes. The main thing I wanted to bring up tonight, because this is big, Francis Ford Coppola's Megapolis. The original script had predictive programming for 9/11, so he scrapped it. The new script has a lot to do with old Russian satellites falling to Earth. He releases the movie, and now old Russian satellites are busting up in orbit, presumably falling to Earth. And if they hit your house, you can sue NASA for $80,000 for mental anguish. Is anybody else here mentally anguished by NASA? Salty says, Tim, what the fuck? I was researching how to test the orgonite pyramid I made for funsies, and the sample experiment created a frozen COVID's ball from the energy, and I saw it exactly as you said, COVID ball. Fascinating. One more thing about the COVID's ball. When I first saw it, I'm like, that looks like a globe covered in red mushroom clouds, which made me think the communists are going to nuke everyone. Ground zeros everywhere. Well, we had ground zeros everywhere as the pandemic spread, and that spiky ball turned red. So if you look at the COVID ball, it's the perfect emblem, a perfect symbol for World War III. And that's why I would maintain that World War III kicked off on 3/11/2020, and that it's never going to end. That World War III is in fact a war by the elite against the individual, and they're winning. Mark Johnson said I could be mentally anguished for £80,000. We should do a class action. Let's just all do it. I mean, I would get behind a class action lawsuit to sue the airlines just to get the truth out through discovery and to allay the fears of the skyphobes. Like, I don't mean to mock the skyphobes. If you're skyphobic, it's fine, but I just want you to know that you've adopted the same belief system as chemtrail believers, as climate change believers. And it's really fascinating how this works, because you have climate models. And this is another thing. There's not a climate model. There are hundreds of them. And sort of like how you have people with multiple gematria calculators and ways of attributing significance to the next date, similarly, you have climate models. And you just pick the one that matches, discard the ones that don't. Eventually, it makes it look like you have predictive capability. And yet, you'll notice that their prophecies never come true. It's because they're both operating with the same approach, the same trick. And it is a trick. But these various, climate models, which are all but interchangeable, are pretty much just a way of more or less making themselves seem right, sort of like the Texas sharpshooter. One of these models is going to match. But anyway, my point of it is this. They claim, based on their models, that there has been this much change from A to Z. Look what man has done. Look what we did in the last 50 years to Gaia. So you have this difference, the baseline and the difference. And they're saying we caused this. Well, I don't believe it was caused. I don't believe it even happened. I don't believe there's a natural cycle. I don't believe they're models. But here's the ironic thing, is the chemtrail people believe in those models. They say, oh, it did happen. They did change the weather. But it was caused by geoengineering, which is strange and bizarre, because geoengineering is the term the environmentalists use to describe hypothetical techniques to stop climate change. Hypothetical solution to a fake problem. And yet both sides believe these things are real. Anyway, I hope it's not convoluted, but we're going to get rid of this whole thing. We are. And if I can get 15 or 20 motivated chemtrail enthusiasts, I'll spearhead a class action lawsuit. But I don't think it's going to happen. I don't see any motivation. I could get climate change people to sue for climate angst. Climate angst is a recognized, probably DSM-5 or something. Climate angst is actually killing people. Yale experts explain climate anxiety. 6 tips for coping with climate anxiety. So don't mock this. You can't laugh at this. Does climate change impact mental health? How do you cope with it? Sit with your feelings. Avoid becoming overwhelmed. Continue to function and try to find joy. Engage in climate action and instill hope for the future. Just focus on what you can control. Participate in climate change initiatives. I guess you should recycle. Kneel in front of the recycling bin. Apologize to Gaia for non-recyclables. Change the way you commute to campus. Yeah, in fact, you should go like a penitent on your knees. Just crawl to school. Engage family and friends in conversations about climate change and donate to organizations. So these are all tips to deal with your climate anxiety. Now, as much as you might want to mock this, you have to remember that the chemtrail people are just as anxious. They're terrified, they're scared, they're worried, and they need tools to cope. That's probably why they call me. All right, let's see here. Mark Johnson says, tried sending some funding for the lawsuit. Oh, speaking of which, and this is really good news, the Hunter Biden lawsuit is moving forward. The Hunter Biden lawsuit is going to involve accusations and possible charges of hacking against Hunter Biden. And even better, the judge has specifically ruled that they are going to, in discovery, find out the specific means and personnel involved in the exploitation of the hard drive, the chain of custody, who funded the efforts. In other words, the person that I'm suing is going to be exposed separately in this lawsuit. This is separate from mine. And this is all just a win because once he is doxxed, a lot of things are moving forward. I mean, we have a monster of a lawsuit, of a cyber squatting campaign suit, just waiting. And he has less than 5 days to respond to my suit. And a non-response is a response, so the clock is ticking. Things are going to get very interesting here in about the next 5 days. And one more thing, the IPR deep dives are about to begin. I've set up my office to do interviews, etc. And what I'm working on is, as you can see it on the screen actually, I have a image of a cyborg penguin interviewing Mothman. I have a number of interviews planned for the coming weeks and months in person. And this is something too, we have to get into the meat verse. Debating online is pointless. It just gets lost. If you really believe in something and you're willing to publish information about it, warn the public, you're going to cry wolf, you're going to be a Paul Revere, passing out these red pills, you should be willing to stand up in public and make these claims and defend them. So we're moving into the next phase, and the next phase is the above ground. The think tank becomes a meetverse version of this chat room where we mix with the real world and engage in debate about these various topics. And I think we'll bring out more honesty, because there's something intrinsically dishonest about someone who hides behind a moniker and dodges accountability for bogus claims. And that's what this is about, accountability. But anyway, everything's moving forward according to plan. We're waiting to see what the judge is going to say to the latest motion I filed in opposition to a motion to dismiss. And I specified that I'm very interested in dragging the YouTube employee who communicated with Goldfinch into the trial as a John Doe defendant, and possibly, I even said this, I said I want him to be prosecuted alongside Goldfinch. But we'll see. We'll see what they say. No one's going to be happy. They're not going to be happy about what I've said, because there's no disputing of these facts. There's no argument. We all agree these things happen. And we may end up going to trial, which would be a huge victory for the IPS. We want that, but we'll see how it goes. I also would advise anyone who's interested or already involved as an IPR reporter, if you're a press pass carrier, if you have a press pass and you want to be more involved in the IPR deep dives, we do, basically investigation, research, and now we're going to be moving into the realm of above ground video interviews. If you want to be involved in any of that, you will want to go to ips.monster, join Patreon, because I'm going to be putting out notices. Like, I'm going to be in this city on this date, and this is what we're going to be doing. And so we're arranging a number of meetups to distribute Autohoaxology 101, the ideas within, and to debate certain topics within its framework. And we're kicking that off really sooner than later. It would have been months ago, but I've been focusing on this legal thing. But I have it under control. Mostly now, it's just a waiting game. But I see it as a win-win. As long as we just maintain this position and don't waver from it, there's no losing. I think that's kind of why on the phone, Google's attorney asked me, this is really about you and this guy Goldfinch. Could you just, drop us from the suit? And I'm like, what? The guy who works for YouTube needs to go to jail. Like, no. But they asked very weakly, almost pathetically, which makes me think that they know that it's doomed. All right, we'll continue this conversation tomorrow. This is One-Eyed Jack and the Shells. Pope Elon. Thanks, comments. Thanks for all the comments, calls, and everything else. Sign up for the newsletter.
If we're born on Earth, why not die on Mars? Seems like maybe it'd be kind of exciting. But so I think, given the choice of dying on Earth or dying on Mars, I'd say, yeah, sure, I'll die on Mars.
Father, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Give us each our daily bread, and forgive us our sins. For we ourselves forgive everyone who is indebted to us. And lead us not into temptation.
And you can tell it's real because it looks so fake.